I'm really happy to be hosting the former Foreign Minister of Spain and the current UN High Representative for the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, Miguel Ángel Moratinos. I'm Dan Runde. I'm a Senior Vice President here at CSIS. The United Nations Alliance of Civilizations was set up in 2005 under the sponsorship of Spain and Turkey. Through the Alliance's efforts, it seeks to build cross-cultural trust through projects on youth, media, education, migration, and most recently, women as peace mediators. The program is administered in New York by the High Representative, who's with us today, and it's supported by a group of friends, including 129 UN member states, 1 non-member state, and 29 international organizations. I'm interested in this topic. Religion and spirituality play an instrumental role in conflict prevention and resolution. Yet religion is also often described as the missing dimension of statecraft. The Alliance can be seen perhaps as a response to Samuel Huntington's 1993 article, The Clash of Civilizations, in which he argued that people's religion and cultural identities would be the primary source of conflict in the post-Cold War era. A year later, my friend and former colleague here at CSIS authored the first edition of Religion, the Missing Dimension of Statecraft by CSIS alum Dr. Douglas Johnston, and we hosted a couple years ago the 25th anniversary of that book here at CSIS in 2019. And so Johnston argued that although religion plays a central role in many conflicts, a vast majority of Western diplomats and Western policymakers tend to ignore or misunderstand its positive potential. People would rather talk about almost anything other than religion in foreign policy circles. So the UN Alliance of Civilizations represents in part a response to these kind of this vacuum, if you will, and also to improve, seeking to improve understanding and cooperative relations across diverse communities and to counter the forces that fuel polarization and extremism. Well, I think we find ourselves in a world of disruptions and great power competition. We're emerging out of a global pandemic and grappling with the impact of the ongoing war in Ukraine. So I think it's essential that we understand the enduring role of religion in all of this, and I think it has a significant dimension. In many parts of the developing world, religion remains a central organizing principle of how people view the world. I would argue, and I think many would argue, that the West finds itself in a post-religious world in which the role of religion is unfortunately up for debate. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to the High Representative. So I'm really happy to have you, Mr. High Representative.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice President, my dear friend, Daniel Runde. Thank you for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to be in such a prestigious center. I mean, CSIS is one of the inspiring centers not only in the United States, but all over around the world. And for me, it's a great privilege to address to the audience and to share with you, I think, the new elements that have to be taken into account in this changing world. You know, everybody agree, we will all agree that we are in a transition period of history of humankind, and geopolitics, as you say, is a fragmented, let's say, very convulsive momentum in history. And I think my role and the mandate of the United Nations Alliance for Civilization can provide certain thoughts and certain ideas to try to build together a better world. So for me, it's an important moment. When we discuss among our organization and CSIS, the title of what we are going to discuss, there was some back and form, trying to find. My first attempt was to deliver a formal speech, after 30 years of this new prophecy of the Professor Emeritus Samuel Huntington, that on the 19th of October 1993 in the Washington Enterprise Institute, launched his theory of a class of civilization. So my first attempt was to have the response, 30 years after, how we come from the class of civilization to an alliance of civilization. But it was too much formal, and I think the people of CSIS and my dear guest of honor, of course, I mean the moderator, Daniel, saying, no, better let's put into today's reality, how we are confronting new challenges today and how the alliance could be a good instrument to respond to the challenge. So if you allow me, before you enter in the question, and then they will elaborate, you know, what can be done together in this momentum, let's go back. Why Samuel Huntington, 30 years ago, wrote this. First, he was a lecturer, then he went to the Foreign Affairs edition, and in his first paragraph of his speech, he said the world is entering in a new phase. Well, we can say today, my dear friend, that we are entering in a new phase. So he was right. We have to go back at that time and to say, 30 years ago, where we were, and were the time of another great politolog, Francis Fukuyama, who says the end of history. And everybody was, convinced, or Francis Fukuyama was convinced at that moment, that there was the end of history because the Iron Curtain has failed, the Soviet Union has collapsed, that the hyperpuissance, like Hubert Védrine will say, United States was overwhelming, conducting the world policy, politically, from the security point of view, from militarity might, from economic and financial strength, from an energetic point of view. Everything was done to be perfect. So Samuel Huntington, he was an extremely well academician, a very strong thinker. He decided, what is still missing? If everything is so good for us, there is still something that maybe neither politics, no military, no economic, no financially can control is culture and religions. And that is going to be, as in the third paragraph say, the new source of conflict will not be military, will not be politically, will be economically, will be cultural or religious based. He was right? No, from my point of view. He was right to defend, and I want to what the first question you are going to put me, to give some sense on the importance of cultural and religious dimension of our life, that unfortunately has been totally neglected. If you go to the archives of any foreign ministry, State Department, cultural and religious elements are missing. And if you look today, and you go to Security Council, and you listed the conflicts that are still on, you will see that all 97% of the conflict of today, they have not the only one, but they have a main dimension based on religion and cultural affair. But we diplomats, I was a mediator. I was a U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East. I will tell you some anecdote of that. We didn't take into account the religious aspect. We didn't incorporate the cultural influence. We were only in the traditional diplomacy, that's territorial gains, power, military, this in the tent, whatever. But what was right, Samuel Huntington to say, no, there is some element in today's reality that have to be taken into account. What was the purpose at that time? He was already concerned about the future of the West. And he thought that the only way to win The hegemony of the West was to really defeat the others on the cultural and religious side. But you don't go to defeat the rest of the world establishing a world religion. You have to elaborate and to defend the platform in order to understand each other. So today we are 30 years later, and I will want to add to Samuel Huntington thinking, a French politologist, also still alive, he's 101 years old, he's living in Morocco, Edgar Morin, who have developed his theory of the complex thinking. What means complex thinking? That today reality is not only economic, is not only philosophical, is not only military, is multidisciplinary. And then in this complex thinking, the cultural religious element have to be incorporated in order to advance. So that has been the, let's say, mandate of the Alliance for Civilization. It's true, and yes, I stop now, that when we launched it, and I was part of the conceptualization of the initiative, it was after the barbarian, the fanatic, the terrorist, when everyone was, enjoying life because we were at the end of history, we thought everything was perfect, they decided to commit this tremendous crime of 9/11. And then they went to London, and then they went to Paris, and then to Bali, then they went to Madrid. And when they went to Madrid, we were elected as a new government. I was elected a new foreign minister. So the first thing we have is we have a challenge of how to eradicate terrorism. And so we decided to create this alliance between the Muslim and Arab world and the Western world together to fight against this fanatic. So the first ADN of the alliance was to fight against terrorism. But today, we have enlarged our scope in order to try to build bridges of understanding and respect among different actors. So that is where we are today, in a very moving scenario with a much more, I would say, let's say, engagement and urgency of the work of the Alliance of Civilization.
It's very, very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Moratinos. That's really quite interesting. I think you've put your finger on a number of really important topics. I think, I do think religion is a missing dimension in statecraft. When you go and speak to foreign ministries, how are you received? I suspect in the Arab world you get a lot of interest, but let's say you go to Europe where we're in a post-religious world. If you go to Canada, if you go to Japan, which is one of the least, I love Japan, but it's the Japan and I think the Czech Republic are some of the least religious societies in the world. Yeah. So if you go to the Czech Republic, and maybe you've been to Prague in this role, or if you've been to Tokyo, what kind of response do you get?
Well, at the beginning they are, surprised and reluctant. But let me briefly tell you a personal anecdote. Yeah. Anecdote that's important. When I was EU Special Envoy to the Middle East, it was after the failure of Camp David negotiation between President Clinton, President Arafat, Prime Minister Barak.
2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was there. So the Camp David talks failed. And I was the first foreign personality that met President Arafat in Andrews Base before. Half an hour later, that President Clinton have a press conference saying, we have failed, and Arafat is the one to be responsible for the failure. What President Arafat told me at that moment, he said, well, I couldn't accept the proposal of Jerusalem. That was very courageous from Prime Minister Barak. It was the first time Israeli negotiation put on the table the Jerusalem issue. But he told me, but how I can accept that? I'm not the custodian of the two mosques. I'm not the custodian of Haram Sharif. I'm not the custodian of the Holy Sepulchre. So I cannot take decision by myself. told the king of Morocco, he's the president of the Al-Quds committee, asked the king of Saudi Arabia, if I have accepted that, I will be so. And then he was, we will elaborate that. But that idea kept in my mind. When I was now appointed High Representative, this idea of how the religious element have to be part of the negotiation. Because if we have prepared the ground, if the Clinton team and others, we have discussed that there is, the way to really maintain the Holy Sepulchre, there are many formulas. I don't know, maybe we have succeeded, but at least we have been treating that better. So responding to the question, religion is part of the problem, as if part of the solution. In the Western world, in Europe mainly, because I think in this sense I've been just having discussion with your Undersecretary General in the State Department, you Americans, or United States, you have a better understanding of religion, you know. But in Western world, in certain way, and in particular in certain European countries, there is this sense of secularism. In the 20th century, Nietzsche said, God is dead. He was the main sentence. God is dead. Nietzsche. What we discover today, that the spirituality is not dead. That every human being, either from ethical point of view, or being a Christian, or being a Jew, or being a Muslim, we have this sense of conscience that make that religion is important element, or the sense of spirituality is important in the way we behave. So unfortunately, in Europe, still there are some countries that are extremely secular. They want to separate, give to the Caesar what is to the Caesar, and to the God what is God. Okay, that's good, in order to, if you respect the state, but you cannot ignore the reality of religion and spirituality. And that is what we can work with the Alliance, that we have to explain today that is not the main element in society, but it's an element you cannot eliminate, you cannot marginalize, because it's like a boomerang, it comes back. So I'm a religious man, but I'm a socialist, but I don't put, my religion is personal, it's private. But at the same time, I have to understand that all people that have feelings, they have concern. And you in the United States, you have to really commend the way you, in general, I mean, in the state, you are much more balanced in this issue. In Europe, still, well, it's a question of it, but the important thing is that the cultural and religious dimension for my work is a tool we should use in a positive manner in order to really have a better response, you know, to the challenge of today.
So, Mr. Martinez, I certainly think in the Middle East, this is certainly a thing, as we'd say in idiomatic English, it's a thing, right? But if I said to you, China, so China, I don't think there's official religion. There's concerns, significant, and I think these concerns are legitimate, that, for example, the Uyghur Muslims are being repressed. I'm Catholic. I'm concerned about the Catholic Church and the treatment of the Catholic Church. And Cardinal Sin, I think, has had some retired Cardinal Sin I'm concerned about the relationship with the Catholic Church in mainland China. So, whereas compared to Taiwan, you have complete religious freedom. And if you haven't been to Taiwan, I encourage you to go. And since you have, I think I would hope you'd get there at some point, because I think they're the exact opposite of how mainland China treats freedom of religion. So I'd be curious, have you been to mainland China in this role, and what's that like? And tell me what kind of conversations you've had in mainland China.
Well, China has we have to all acknowledge is many people qualify China or as a state civilization. No? is one of the examples. No? We have the old Chinese civilization, where we learn. I mean, they invented so many things in history.
Sure.
Well, you go through history.
Yeah.
So it is true that in this long way for the history of China, it has been different period, and religion have taken several confusions and others. So it is true, it's not, I mean, it's a Communist Party. They have the Congress, or the Communist Party. We know how religion has been put totally aside. But as you mentioned, there are very sensitive issues that are appearing. I mean, you mentioned Uyghur. I remember being in this position about Catholic Church, how they negotiate the Holy See and Beijing about how to elect the cardinals, and they have two churches, the one is selected. So there is an issue. I mean, they can not look at that. They want to try not to discuss that, but they are there. So, of course, we have to approach them, and we have to try to get them in the whole system. They have launched a very ambitious and, of course, I think very, very wise, from their point of view, initiative. That was my presence in Beijing as in my new capacity. I was before, when I was foreign minister many times, but as High Representative of the United Nations Alliance for Civilization, I went to the second summit of One Belt, One Road, the New Silk Road.
Yeah.
And they have a special chapter in this plan, in people-to-people meetings on the cultural respect, and you know this terminology they use about shared humanity, harmonic world. So they are not...
It sounds a little Orwellian to me.
Yes,
I think
yes.
most of the people you'll meet in Washington have kind of lost patience with China.
Yes.
So, yeah, they're an
So
old civilization with a lot of religious repression.
There is not
Mr.
present
Moratinos,
there,
yeah.
but the problems are there. As sooner or later, they have to deal with, you know. So we have to talk to them. My methodology has been always to talk to people. I remember one of your main politolog, Mr. Keegan, has said that containment, no? You have to contain at the time, but then also engagement. So my philosophy in foreign policy is to contain if you have a threat, but to engage to solve a problem.
Yeah.
But sometimes we are undermining one element, or you are only insisting in containment, but you don't engage, and so the situation becomes complicated. So my policy toward China is to, of course, defend our point of view, defend the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, at the same time, to engage with them, to try to move forward, because the problems are there.
Have you been to Xinjiang and met with the Uyghurs?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay. How about Christian groups in China?
Yes, yes.
Or you did?
I think the Christian group are also, as I told you, they have a lot of disagreement about how to elect the Catholic people, the Christian people. It's part of the problem that they are existing there, and we have to treat that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'd be curious about, I think we are in a new age, and I think we characterize it as an age of great power competition. So how does that, this was set up in 2005, which we might describe sort of 1990 until 2015 as sort of a unipolar moment. As an American, I miss it. I like the unipolar moment, and I think we're, unfortunately, now have a problem where we have mainland China as sort of a near-peer competitor. I don't wish them well, and I hope they fall back and don't. And I think they're going to have a lot of problems, partially because of their demography and their one-child policy and their selective abortion of women and their religious repression and their repression of business leaders and their techno-authoritarianism. I think there's a lot that makes them an unattractive society in many ways, and we're going to talk about migration later. And I don't see a lot of people migrating to mainland China. I don't see a lot of people desperately banging on the door saying, in the consulates in China saying, please, I want to go, please let me into mainland China. And I don't see that also in Russia. I don't see a lot of people banging on the door of Russia saying, please, I'm desperate to move to Russia, for similar reasons, I would say. So I'd be curious, I think, in sort of this, unfortunately, there's been a hardening of views. Yes, I think we have engagement with China. I know President Biden has been attempting to have conversations with Chairman Xi, and he's not been responding to our phone calls. So how do we, I'd be curious about, we're sort of in this new age. How is that impacting your work? Because I'm sure it has certain sorts of impacts, all sorts of dynamics that in ways when you set this up in 2005. I don't think China was kind of a thing in 2005 when you set this up. It wasn't kind of on the radar in this way that I think when you come to places like Washington now, people want to, probably all they want to do is talk about, they're probably less interested in the Middle East and a lot more interested in China is my guess.
I really, of course, it really impact our work, but I have to say they give our mission much more important. If before this, let's say, new geopolitical challenge and this rivalry is taking place, and from my point of view, unfortunately, because we are leading to a world that is going in a confrontational, period, and with a lot of danger and risk and challenge of the future. It gives us the chance as alliance to try to maintain bridges of understanding, building together one humanity, because at the end of the day, we like it or we dislike it, we're in one humanity. I say to all my interlocutors, I'm very much in favor, of course, of saving the planet. And we are, if he's the first to really take the green flag to say we have to fight against climate change. But to be frank with you, my main concern is to save humanity.
Yes.
And either we live together or we sink together. And so in this world, of course, I can't imagine that being a US, if you go back 30 years ago, of course, hyperpuissance, end of history, very good. I mean, you feel very proud.
It was great.
Yeah,
it was great while it lasted.
Well, it was, all of us, I mean, I can go as a Spaniard to go when, as the Spanish Empire say, the sun doesn't set, around the world, So it was all imperial period. But that the world changed. And what I try to share with my American friend and to my Western countries is that the world has changed. It's not changing. It has changed. And I can't tell you because I'm in New York, daily basis. I see how member states are moving, reacting, and it doesn't mean that the West is decadent. No. It means, as you say rightly, that everybody wants to come to Europe or to the United States and migrate to us because we have succeeded to get the most advanced society. Yes. But why we are losing ground around the world? Let's have some self-criticism, because we need the United States leading the world. We need the American continue to be indispensable actor in the world. But you, US, as Europeans, have to understand there are other forces, that we live in a multipolar world. You like it or dislike it. The time of one single hegemon is over, from my point of view. So in order to maintain our system, in order that we, the West, we will continue to advance and help the others to really consolidate and move towards our goals and ideals, let's be realistic. Galileo Galilei observed the world and say, well, the earth is moving. The people around him, the scientific people, they started saying, no, it's a sin,
They're
you are
all
wrong,
around the
you are wrong. And poor Galilei Galilei, he say, well, I apologize, I was wrong. but when he was kidding, he say, per si muove. He says, you can't continue to say that we are in a Western world. It's not a more a Western world, it's a multipolar world with a very important contribution of the West. And we don't understand that, the rest of our movement are going to be useless. Maybe we are going to, I'm going to say...
I've got several other things I want to cover with you.
Okay, sorry.
All right, so great. So I agree. Okay, so let's talk about migration. One of the things you have taken on in this Alliance of Civilizations is the issue of migration. I think this is an important issue. We are a nation of migrants. We receive 1 million people legally every year in the United States. And we oftentimes, host communities have a certain set of values, and migrants sometimes may have different values. And so what are the responsibilities of host communities to accommodate differing perspectives of migrants? And what are the responsibilities of migrants to embrace and or assimilate to, for example, Enlightenment ideals of host countries? I'm thinking particularly of Europe, where this seems to be an issue. So I'd be particularly curious about, in the context of Europe, where we have migrant communities, and there's been debates in places like Belgium and other places. I don't know if it has happened in Spain. How do we think about accommodating folks with different, we should, there's migration has happened since the beginning of humanity. How should we think about that? This is one of your issues. I would think you would have some thoughtful things to say about this.
Absolutely. I think it's very, 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 very important question. You have put in the question 2 main elements of migration. You have, of course, how the state who received this population have to react, and how migrants have to react to the law and the enforcement of law. Or the state, they are taking you on board. I mean, I think the respect of laws and the way they live in the country you are coming to have to be absolutely the first precondition. But then you have, let's say, a second element that I suffered when I was foreign minister. We have a wave of migrants coming from Africa, Asia. And I will say that the mistake of this wave, of course, the mistake of the lack of policy is because we treat the migration problem as a security problem and a problem of home affairs. The Minister of Home Affairs, the Minister of Interior, they are doing their job. And of course, they want to create, and protect your own country, your citizen, your fabric of society. So they are doing. But what we have not done is we forget that immigration means they are coming from abroad. They are not coming from Manhattan to go, that's internal migration, or to New York, whatever. They are coming, in your case, from Central America. From us, they come from everywhere, from even Asia through Africa. It's a question of foreign policy. And foreign minister, with all my respect, they don't pay attention to that. I remember to stop the wave of migration during my time, I visited Africa 10 times. I opened 7 embassies because the origin is what you have to take care. So that's one element that nobody tells. I mean, how many European foreign ministers have gone to Africa? None. So we put all the protection in the Mediterranean and Atlantic, and then Minister of Interior, we raise the wall, no? I don't know, we will, next time with the help of the new technology, we'll reach the moon, but they will overgo because with the new they will go and then they will land in our place. So walls are not going to stop these people to migrate. What they will stop them is to give them the chance in their own country to develop. So that's number 2. Number 3, as you said, the United States, you were the pioneers in migration. I mean, you have an example, Melting Pond. But of course, you have to do in a way that it doesn't break the fabrics, the main elements of your society. And how are our societies? Let's be frank. We can have only one race, one identity. No, we are in a multicultural society. I know that in certain political parties and movements, they don't like that. But can you ignore that? Look the audience here in front of us. Yeah. We are not too many people. But you can see the different origin. Are you going to ignore that it's a reality? Why diversity is a threat? What can be a richness? You know, we have these fingerprints. We are 8 billion people. 8 billion, not yet, but practically. Each of us is different. Each of us is different. So if we are different, why we don't accept that we are diverse and we can produce better understanding? So the question is how you handle that. Of course, if you get ghettos, or you get reaction, and you get the discrimination in both sides, because it's not only the people that have been living, but the others say they become aggressive, they don't respect the law. But that's part of how you internally have to. And for that, what we are working, our UNOSC, United Nations Alliance of Citizens, we have a tremendous program on social cohesion for maintaining diversity. And people in Europe, responding to your question at the beginning, when we offered them, say, well, not in, and then they said that is good because we have to example, we are working outside of Paris in a city called La Courneuve, that is practically multicultural, multi-racial, etc., and is doing well. So the question how you put people together to respect each other and to try to see that we are different, it doesn't mean that we are going to really confront each other.
That's very helpful. I agree. I think this issue of root causes, we have in the United States, there's been some analysis done at the Center for Global Development that says when a country hits $8,000 per capita, people stop migrating. So I agree with you that part of it is about development. Part of this is about development and prosperity and kind of, so I agree with that. But I do think it strikes me as that this is there's sort of an ongoing debate in different societies about how do we accommodate. I agree. I think it's a terrible outcome if you have people who are are sort of end up in sort of ghetto situations. That's a terrible outcome. And I think, we have people from all over the world who come to the United States. We've had allies, our Afghan allies came. So in my Catholic church, our parish said, okay, we're going to ask people to help receive an Afghan family. And so I think there's an understanding that, people who were with us in the Afghan cause or in Vietnam, we had people who escaped communism, or in Cuba, that there have been situations where we have a moral responsibility to receive people. I think so. I understand that. But I do think this issue of how do we balance sort of what expectations people have when they come to a new society? How do they balance values and sort of where they're coming to a new place? I think seems to be an ongoing debate all over the world. I want to come back to the issue of I'm particularly I don't know how much you're going to get questions about this here in Washington in your visit, but I would say there are many people animated in Washington by concerns about the repression of Christianity in different parts of the world, whether it's in the Middle East. And so in my church, we've talked about it. There are places in other parts of the world. I'm frankly concerned about it in Nicaragua. We've done events here. We hosted a Catholic bishop here to talk about the awful repression of the Catholic Church in Nicaragua. I find it personally offensive what's happening in Nicaragua. So could you tell us, what is the UN Alliance of Civilizations doing to protect Christians around the world? And in particular, I'd be curious if you have any views about what's happening specifically in Nicaragua, because I'm particularly interested in that. And CSIS has done a lot of very effective and useful work on this specific issue.
Absolutely, it's one of our priorities, like similar of fighting against anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, Christianophobia is one of our files, and of course we are trying to defend that and even to promote. We are trying to promote it, and I think we have made certain progress in the Arab world, and particularly in the Gulf. We have a fantastic tool, very good platform that was launched with the wisdom and authority of two great personalities, Pope Francis and the great Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed Tayeb, that they produced the Human Fraternity document that called for understanding between the Christians and the Muslim world. For this Human Fraternity document has produced already certain impressive results. In Emirates, they have created what they call the Abrahamic family house that really have the three religions, Abrahamic religions together. If you have the chance to go to Abu Dhabi, I really recommend you to go. They have, Emirates is a wealthy country, so they can be able, so they have developed fantastic a church, fantastic cathedral, fantastic synagogue, fantastic mosque, beautiful of three, and then they have this philosophy that we have to respect each other. With Saudi Arabia, for instance, we've been working hard in order that Christians have their say, their place. And there is an ongoing discreet dialogue between the Holy See and Saudi authorities in order to have the possibility to have churches, you know.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be great. And I think at the end of the day, it will happen. They need, I think the Saudis are aware of that. The new leadership of Saudi Arabia are in favor of that. But of course they are, you know, they need also to counterbalance internal negative forces. And so they need a little time, but we are pushing for that.
How about Nicaragua?
Nicaragua, of course, we denounced that. I mean, you know, one of the main leaders, the bishop, you know, has been, you know, terrible. And I think we are working with our American friends, Latin American friends, in order to really push forward. So, of course, we have to do more. I mean, I remember that when I was in EU Special Envoy to the Middle East, I mean, the problem of the Middle East is the Christian community, either in Lebanon or in Palestinian territories, you know, they were, you know, abandoning Middle East because they
feel in danger, they feel repressed.
And that is part of our, I think, our responsibility of we have to protect them. And we were now recently to Iraq. We were with a religious community of Catholic cardinal of Iraq. And we also promote with the government the respect and the possibility. So we are taking care. And the same with Africa. Africa is changing a lot.
Yeah. And
our work on mediation is with religious communities. For instance, Central African Republic, we are working with the communities in order to support the Catholic and the Christian. And you know, we have a responsibility in the alliance to safeguard religious sites around the world. It was a plan that was launched due after the Christchurch attack in New Zealand, but of course it's addressing all kind of religious sites.
I saw that.
And so we are If there is any incident, any violation, we try to read it. But I have to tell you, something that, of course, public opinion have not yet grasped. I see an evolution. Before, when there was an attack against a synagogue, an attack against a mosque, an attack against a church, there was the community, and then, well, the colleagues from the Jewish community or from the Muslim, they say, well, we are with you, we are very solidarious. It was a reactive, to the attack of one of them. Today, I found that all of them, there is a much more, let's say, positive attitude to prevent, and to work together. So I see many of the conferences we organize on interfaith and interreligious dialogue, we found them and we are not only working with the top leaders, of course, the patriarchs, or the bishop, or the imam, they are very important. But we organize a very interesting conference and networks, workshop, with the young religious leader. Because you can have at the top of the hierarchy wise people that call for understanding, peace, and harmony, but then on the daily basis you have a radical priest, or you have a radical imam, or you have a Jewish, rabbi that he doesn't like it. We have to teach them how to work together, and that's what we try to do. And we have organized with the United Nations Counterterrorism Organization a workshop that went very well, and we are going to repeat it.
That's very encouraging. So we've done a lot here on the war, Russia's illegal war on Ukraine. We have a commission here at CSIS, a high-level commission on the reconstruction of Ukraine. Your predecessor and my very good friend, former Foreign Minister Anna Palacio, is on it. Actually, she spoke here earlier today on a virtual event on burden sharing, allied burden sharing. I insisted when we put the commission together that we have somebody from a religious community. So the graduation speaker last June at the University of Notre Dame, which is the most important Catholic university in the United States, was Bishop Boris Gudziak of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, which is a Greek rite that is as part of the Catholic Church. And so I thought he's also the president of the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. So I did so because I thought it was important for us to understand that there strikes me as that there's a significant and complicated religious dimension that as somebody who's a practicing Catholic, I don't fully understand. I don't understand Orthodoxy, but I know it's really important to kind of understanding how Russia looks at the world and how Ukraine looks at the world. Could you talk a little bit about how religion impacts the conflict in which, in Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and how that's playing out, and how is the Alliance of Civilizations interacting in that theater?
First, from the beginning, I wrote an article and a statement to denounce and to declare formally that the war in Ukraine was not a war of civilization. That President Putin and his leadership was trying to use religion or so-called Russian civilization as an element to try to justify or try to defend their aggression. No? So that is not at all. Yeah. It's not, and it's so obvious that, of course, they are using that just again, when there was this attempt in March 2022 to get an armistice, you remember that there was negotiation, Well, around the negotiation table, there was not, they didn't mention about religions. There was not a religious representative. There was a military, intelligence service, entrepreneur, whatever you want, but there was not a religion. The religion element was not part of the negotiation. If you go to any, let's say, imaginative solution for the war, they will put you the NATO security concern, all kind of elements for the future, but they not include the civilization point of view. So that is out of the question. So the Ukrainian war was a military, political decision of President Putin to enter and to occupy this part of independent Ukraine. But it's true that during the war, there has been religious and cultural buildings, monuments that have been destroyed in attack. And we have denounced that, you know. And there is the main concern.
Religious repression too. When Russia's taken over different parts of Ukraine, there's been specific repression of religious groups.
Absolutely. But, you know, who are suffering? Suffering, of course, the Ukrainian people that they cannot express, that they cannot allow to go to the main, to Article 18, I confuse Article 18 and Article 19. One is the freedom of expression, another is the right to exercise your religious feeling of faith and belief, etc. Well, they have to have the right to go to church and to decide what church they want and to really have it or not. So we have to continue to denounce that. And I think we have recently the Russians said that the Orthodox Church in Russia has been also been attacked. So we have to preserve that the religious feeling and the religious site and the religious monastery have to be preserved in any kind of conflict and war. And let's wait for this to happen, the sooner the better, you know. So that is my comment to your question.
Well, this is, Mr. Moratinos, this is really very, very interesting. You have a very large and important agenda. I think I'm really happy to see that you've been entrusted with this important role. I think the agenda that you have is more important than ever. I think it's sometimes not fully appreciated in many capitals, is my guess. So I think it's really important that you continue to come to places like Washington. You're always welcome here, but I also want to encourage you to you have an important platform in the United Nations and an important charge. So we're so happy to have had you here today, and I'm going to ask folks to join me in thanking Mr. Moratinos. Thank you. Thank you. Good.